Okay.
Hey everyone, and welcome to the now ninth episode of ICC. We have on our most common returning guest, Satnam, today, and rather than talking broadly about a whole series of primary elections, we're going to be talking about one specific topic, Iran, the recent ceasefire agreement, the whole fiasco around the Strait of Hormuz, what this means for the United States, what we should do as Americans, especially those of conscience, to respond, and so on. So, Satnam, how you doing?
I'm doing good. Thank you for that introduction. These Lego wrap videos. First of all, I don't like AI, but these I will give a pass. They are clever, and I don't think they're using AI for the writing. I think they have actual lyricists because it's too good for that to be AI. They're
Hmm.
taking their time. I think they're using AI actually for the busy work to create a draft. But I'm
Exactly.
good.
Yeah, yeah. I was right. I was about to say, I'm like, if I were to be most critical, maybe they threw the prompt, the specific prompt in the AI and then went by it afterwards. But I'm like, that's not just AI raw because I've seen AI raw do content, and you could tell if you're in the, especially if you're in any specific industry, like if you're a cinematographer, you'd be able to tell the differences. I'm not, so I couldn't tell those differences, but so my goodness, where do you want to start with this topic? Because this is a whole thing that has been propped up literally my entire life about how Iran's so scary and evil and they're our biggest enemy and stuff like that, and just a lot of misinformation about like how Iranian people even live. So like, where do we even start with this?
I I think, okay, I have to give clip notes as we don't have enough time for all of it, but we do have to start in the 50s. We do have to start with Mossadegh. I think that when we look at the democratically elected, I don't know if we can count him leftist. I think in modern day American politics, he would be a leftist. But he was more or less just like he wasn't even necessarily a nationalist. He believed in nationalizing resources, which is a bridge too far for Western imperial powers. So in the 50s, Iran had an interesting situation where they had this like dynastic Pahlavi family that was kind of like had like monarchical like uh things for like one generation. They weren't like an actual old school dynastic family, but they assumed like a monarchy, then were in exile, and then were back for like, I don't know, it was like, I don't know, 25 years or something like that. And so they basically, when this guy Mossadegh decided, I want to nationalize Iranian oil and I don't want British BP, I don't want them to own our oil. And so, of course, America and the UK are they're they're like this, right? So like we are, if we think about it in the lens of America as the inheritor of the British Empire, we are one and the same for the most part. And so I think that what transpired after that was the reality of what we're seeing in Iran today. In '79, there was the Islamic Revolution. There was an Iran hostage scandal. They took over the U.S. embassy. I think a lot of people, for a lot of them, the story starts there, but without any context. And so it's this Islamist regime. And a big part of that is during Shah Pahlavi, when the democratically elected Mossadegh was ousted and they did a coup, the Shah during that time was very repressive, but was kind of like a pro-West, like kind of like think about like Tel Aviv. It was Iran was like trying to do this whole like secular like Persian thing, which also was part of Mossadegh's thing as well. But Mossadegh was a secularist that stayed true to the West Asian cultural roots, whereas the Shah was a secularist that was trying to westernize Iranian culture. And so it led to tensions, and they had secret police during the Shah time, but the secret police were not organizing in the mosques. So the secret police, so the Shah understood he could not have secret police in the mosque. So the Islamist revolution was the revolution that took hold. There were revolutionaries in Iran during that time, but it was the Islamists that didn't have secret police that were monitoring them because they could organize in mosques. So they won out. So now fast forward 47 years into this regime, uh, uh, prior to 79, Iranian Jews mostly stayed in Iran. After 79, Iranian Jews mostly fled to Los Angeles and with a smattering going to Israel. But for the most part, what ended up happening was a lot of the Iranian Jews that fled, they were pro-Shah and they were pro Zionism, but were pro Farsi culture. So they're like, we're pro Zionism, but we don't really like Israeli culture, so we want to form like little old school Persia in Los Angeles. And then there was also pro-Shah Muslims and people of all different faiths that were like, yeah, we also want to go to Los Angeles, and we also are like Zionists. We're just like culturally Muslims, secular Muslims. And this should sound familiar to anybody who has talk about like Orthodox Judaism, Reform Judaism, and secular Jews and all that. So Iran has a similar dynamic going there. So that what that ended up happening is overnight from 47 to 79, Iran was like a huge ally of Israel. Overnight, they're now all of a sudden not. But Iran maintains the largest Jewish population in the Middle East. And so they also maintain closer relations with Armenia than they do Azerbaijan, which people need to understand that Iran is not like they're the Islamic Republic of Iran as a reality, but that does not like they've had historically closer trade relations with India than Pakistan. So like people need to understand that religion and allyship and relationships are totally different things. Also, in the early days before the Iraq War, Iran was helping the U.S. In Afghanistan as well. And they have some tensions with Pakistan when in regard to the Balochi people. So there's a lot of misinformation when it comes to what is Iran's true motives in all of these situations. And I know I just threw a lot of information at you, but like it's important to understand that Iran is not necessarily going to be with people need to understand the Sunni Shia divide, but also that a Muslim country and another Muslim country are as likely to be an ally as a Christian country is with another Christian country just because they're Christian. It's not maybe they are, maybe they aren't, but it's like there's other things at play here. Um, the other thing that I want people to understand is in the last 47 years, US and Israel have constantly been picking off by when I say picking off, like literally bombing scientists and military generals. And also the Iranian consulate in Damascus. And General Qasem Soleimani and like all of these people. And they've been notoriously also US and Israel both bombing negotiators during negotiations. So people need to understand that Iran has had crippling sanctions on them for about 20 years or so that would destroy most countries. And now this is where we talk about why Iran is in the situation we're in, and I'll throw it back to you in a little bit. But when we discuss that, the reality is that they had crippling sanctions, which would have destroyed many countries, except for the fact that Iran is a population of 90 million people. It's a sixth of the size of the U.S., which is about two Texases, which is a huge land space. It has a bunch of natural resources. It can defend itself through like natural terrain, like mountains and like caves, and it has a sophisticated society that is highly scientific, very strong engineering program, and like the Strait of Hormuz is actually like I was like looking at it on a map, just based on like where they're geographically located. It actually is very easy for them with minimal like drone technology that they've seemingly also because we've been constantly pelting them with like bombs, they have developed weapons to specifically bypass Western weapons for the last 47 years. So, yeah, we are here today because Iran was not this like small little society without resources that if you cut them off from sanctions, what you just did is you start keep on pelting them with weapons, you give them a reason to build up a military industrial complex infrastructure, and you give them a reason to build it around the weapons that are pelting they're being pelted with. So
Mhm. Absolutely. And some of those details highlight why, and I've noticed this mentioned by a couple of people. I wish I could call off their names off the top of my head, but that regardless of your disposition of the morality, the Iranian government as an entity is run by moral actors in the sense that they are very clearly trying to do the decisions that they feel are logically best effective to sustaining the existence of that state. And when you contrast that with the United States leaders, our country, unfortunately, right now, the same thing cannot be said. And the allyship with Armenia is actually a great example. They understand that their government has some vulnerability to, say, Balochi partisanship or Azeri partisanship, because there are significant communities there. And both, well, not both, Azerbaijan in particular would have some certain incentives to animate that community and be a little bit more aligned with actors that are not so friendly with Iran and stuff like that. And so rather than go ahead and like bomb Azeris or bomb Azerbaijan, they go ahead and ally with Armenia, but are very cautious about how much they're willing to get into that. But they don't want a total Azeri success because they see the vulnerable failures for that. Whereas because they know the problems that that would have within their own borders. Whereas for the United States, we're going to go ahead apparently and bomb Venezuela and send a bunch of people to El Salvador and put a bunch of economic sanctions on everybody and blockade Cuba and not assume that that's going to involve result in another wave of refugees coming to the United States because they have nowhere else to go inevitably. Like it's just not very good long-term thinking, and it's not rational decision making. It's not decision making based on what's most effective for your long-term vision or even your short-term vision. Whereas the Iranian regime clearly is like just dog walking Trump and everybody in the United States government. I mean, they've decided to, by the, I'm trying to think of the term, but the false notion of this being an easier winnable war that they've been sold by Netanyahu and everybody in the Israeli government and stuff like that. And so it's just so embarrassing. It's just embarrassing as an American to see this right now, to know that our government is run by a bunch of fools, people so foolish. I mean, as I've mentioned before, even Bush wasn't stupid enough to get dragged into Iran, and he got dragged into Iraq, which wasn't exactly the wisest move on earth.
yeah, I mean that's such a catchy hook too. Your government's run by pedophiles. They're
Hmm.
asking you to die for Israel. And that's the thing about like this whole Lego rap is that it's total war propaganda, which all sides do, but it's also like Iran has been able to maintain to be honest, they've maintained the moral high ground in all of this, and I think that it's quite. This is why they're first of all they're winning the war, but they're winning the war of Western public opinion war as well, and so like you have to win both, and so uh, this is very clear that. So Robert Pape, Professor Pape, he was on Democracy Now! With Amy Goodman, and I was listening to it, and he was talking about how we have to rethink uh, global powers. And one of the things is that, like, okay, U.S. is an empire in decline, but we're still an empire. I really hate the fact that we have as much impact on the global South as we do. I really hate it, and but that's the truth. and then Russia, China. And he was saying that Iran is now developing as a new global superpower. And the case he was trying to make, and I think this is a case that we need to also understand, is when we look at colonization, we look at imperialism, and we look at all of those things. And I'm not trying to say Iran is an imperialistic country in that realm, but when we look at who has been able to actually gain power, it is who had the navies that controlled waterways and controlled trade. So we look at the history. It was the Dutch, then it was the Portuguese and the Spanish, then it was the French, and then it was the British, then the Americans. Now it's becoming the Chinese. But one of the things that China is doing better than Western imperialists is China is definitely an imperialist. Iran is not. China is. Um, I think that what we have to understand though is that what they're doing is they really, first of all, China probably would, what I think is going to happen in the Gulf Arab states is American bases in some countries like UAE. I think if UAE is going to get serious about actually solving the fact that like a bunch of expats are just leaving the country because they're like, fuck this, and uh, like 80% of their country is expats, and all of the people who work in there are either white collar expats or blue collar slaves, basically. So like I think that when we recognize all of those things, I think that uh, China basically would probably prefer an American military base in UAE to be replaced by an Iranian military base that is China backed. And I think that China would prefer that over a Chinese military base there because I think that what China wants to do also, I think first of all, China is in this position where they're watching America just like shoot itself in the foot massively. And they're like, let's let them do this. But then they're also seeing Iran successfully putting to a halt 20, like a fifth of all of global trade goes through it. So I think what China is trying to do is they're saying, hey, we can co-rule with people. We're actually okay with that because they don't have an ego about it. And they're like, okay, Iran has actually proven that they are worthy of this coalition because they actually can shut down 20% of global trade. And they are making us flush with oil. So we have an energy advantage over the West with our alliance with Iran. Yes, we want Iran to be rich. So basically, China is of the opinion that, yeah, you know what? They're a country of 90 million people with a diaspora of 10 million. So like, and some of that diaspora maybe if maybe not the crazy Iranian diaspora, but some of them might want to go back to a superpower economic like beast of Iran. So yes, whoever controls the waterways and whoever can guarantee safe passage of oil to countries like Japan, South Korea, Australia, New Zealand, Indonesia, India. We're talking about like, and this is the thing that Western imperialists will never get through their thick skulls. They will never get through their thick skulls that they can bloviate about their power all they want. But what are you going to do when, like, one country can shut down 20% of oil and they have a tighter, like, actual cultural and tighter bond with the Asian countries that make up, like, what, like 60% of the global population? Like there are facts on the ground, and that's a fact on the ground that Western imperialists refuse to accept because supremacy makes people stupid.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And just to highlight the point, between, let's start with, say, towards the end of World War II and up until now, when most people would unequivocally say the United States was either equal or unequivocally was the greatest power. We've got coups in Guatemala. We've got military coups in Honduras. We've got coups in Chile. We've got the Korean War. We've got Afghanistan. We've got Iraq. We've got Vietnam. We've got all these conflicts, all these places we're going into, on top of the indirect places that we're helping, like all the places that Israel's bombing with American weapons, et cetera, et cetera. And yet, despite that, despite all of that war rushing, despite all that conquest and bombing other places, China keeps, even by conservative standards, by liberal standards, doesn't matter your politics. Every American would agree. China is a lot closer to where America is in broad power, whatever you would define that as, be it economic, cultural, technological, et cetera, et cetera. They're closer now than they were when during the end of World War II. And that should tell people that all this warmongering ain't doing you no good. Because if people not doing that are gaining on you, that should obviously tell you to reassess your assessment. I mean, outside of the conquest of Tibet, I can't really think of too many, well, and also the Chinese involvement in the Korean War, but outside of those two instances, I can't think of significant conquests. Like China didn't go into Sri Lanka, they used economics and good reputation or engineering and stuff like that, indirect and soft power, and that's winning by a lot. Like, when are
Yeah,
people going to
I
learn to
mean,
stop making the same mistakes?
I mean, Emmanuel Macron, he just, I can't remember exactly when it was, but it was like after Trump had that unhinged Truth Social post, and he was just saying, "Oh, go get your oil, like go take it or whatever." Like France, they negotiated terms with Iran. We don't know what those terms are, but basically, what I suspect is they just paid whatever the toll path was, and they made a negotiation. It's astonishing like a NATO ally of ours went around it. The British they like are refusing to join British troops in Iraq or whatever, refusing to join in this effort. And so uh and this is the other thing, like Iran has intercontinental ballistic missiles that can reach Europe, not America, but Europe. And they can reach like European capitals. And like I think that what we're seeing right now is a recognition from these supremacist, imperialist countries that are not as craven as America because they don't have like endless money in their political system, but they're still supremacist, Western chauvinists and Western supremacists. I think that what they're starting to realize is like Western chauvinism might is right tactics, and they're seeing Iran militaristically win, and they're starting to actually get it, like that it doesn't matter what we think. It doesn't matter if we think we're superior. The facts, they're more like willing. It seems like they're more willing to accept the facts for what they are. And so I think that supremacy makes people stupid. Corporate PACs also make people stupid, not just because they're a bribe, but I do think to some degree, some of these corporate PACs and some of these defense contractors and some of these politicians, in order to do what do, they convince themselves the lie is correct. They convince themselves that the bribe is legitimate and they are legitimately doing the right thing for the American people. Um, I have seen some reports, I don't know if you have, but I've seen some reports of dissension in the military ranks though, which is um actually encouraging because I do, as much as I have smoke for military, I do also think that a lot of these military personnel, they know what's up. They have seen war firsthand, and so I don't know what you think about that. So
Yeah, yeah. I think for the major with any with any community, be it like a fandom, ethnic identity, linguistic community, whatever, the second you get to tens of thousands or greater and you're talking about that big of a mass, you're going to find some of the best of humanity and some of the worst of humanity. So immediately I'm thinking of Dylan Blaha, Demi Palachek, Greg Stoker, Anthony Aguilar, Brian McGinnis. Like a lot of these veterans are our greatest allies in the anti-war movement and have arguably the most wisdom to pass on to the rest of us as everyone else. Yet simultaneously, just less than 24 hours ago, I was arguing with someone in, I believe it was Schneider's comment section, that they were saying basically, yeah, I deployed to Iraq and stuff, and you should be thankful for what President Trump is doing because he's the right thing. And I'm like, oh, really? He's doing the right thing? How many WMDs did you find in Iraq when you were there, buddy? So it totally depends on the person. I think most people have definitely learned and figured it out. I think the fact that there's a lot more enthusiasm, a lot less enthusiasm, and they're having to like, there are rumors and some legislative motions of increasing or lowering the draft age, or sorry, increasing the draft age and making that more of a threat over people's heads and stuff like that. It's very obvious that like people don't want to do this. The vast majority of the public want none of this. I mean, I've seen people from all over the political spectrum, and most importantly, across political engagement. I've seen recently when it comes to like critique of Israel or like the genocide in Gaza, that people who are politically engaged on either side will typically be like-minded about it, but people who weren't politically engaged didn't have as strong of an opinion on it. Whereas everybody, I think, whether you're politically engaged or not, is pretty universally understanding that this war is like mostly waged entirely, if not mostly, for the benefit and interests of Israel, and this doesn't benefit us, and we're getting our butts kicked.
Yeah, so okay, the connection between my people, the Punjabi people, and the Farsi culture and the Persian culture, is what I want to also like illustrate. So the language that I grew up speaking in addition to English was Punjabi, and it has like I think it's about 25 to 30% of its loan words come from Farsi. And so it's kind of similar dynamic to English versus Spanish or French, where like even if you can't speak those languages, you can make out some words within. And so I think that like one of the things that the West always gets wrong when it comes to all of this, like for example, um, a lot of people don't realize chess comes from West and South Asian, like that area. They were kind of co-mingling there. And checkmate, for example, checkmate comes from shamat, which means the king is dead. And so, like, I throw that out there because uh, it does matter. Like I know Zionists, they always say that they have this society built on a 3,000 year like civilization. Well, actually, Iran, that is actually true. It's
Mm-hmm.
older than 3,000 years
Are
old.
older.
Or older, right? Like maybe 5,000, something like that, right? And so, and I hate to do like I have to make this point when it comes to Iran, because like the Zionists, they'll be like, see, like the civilization matters. No, you knuckleheads, it wasn't like an untouched civilization throughout those ages, right? So modern Iranians do have some element of like passed down. Persian culture that also influenced Armenian culture, also influenced the cultures around it, as is the case always, right? And so like I think that uh they are a society that has been more mature and smarter in terms of how they engage with the rest of the world because they've had to, but also I think that they lean on liturgy as well. Like they have epic books and they're literary historical literary books about like past battles, and they have like all of these different I can't really think of one right now off the top of my head, but like they
I can
do
give a
have.
couple examples of historical figures. I mean, you've got Zarathustra and the whole Avesha and the whole mythology around that, that arguably many theologic historians would argue was the first ever monotheistic religion to inspire all the others. There's also
There
later
you
the
go.
Prophet Mani. We understand Christianity, well, not we, but religious scholars tend to like would describe Christianity as Jewish religious traditions, meaning Greco-Hellenic cultural traditions. And Manichaeism was basically Jewish religious traditions meeting Mesopotamian and Iranian religious traditions. And that ended up going all the way to China until the 1800s. And like people have no idea about this. People have no comprehension of that. And the sort of the one of my favorite points right in here, because we've got till I think 251 till it shuts off on me, is to really just dig at the Zionists about the claim of unbroken history and stuff like that. I love to point out the fact that there have been Greeks on the land of Israel and Palestine that have spoke some version of the Greek language, not a majority typically at any single point in time, but at least some community since before the ancient kingdom of Israel existed. Does that mean I have more of a birthright to that land than every single like Israeli person there? No, because neither of us were indigenous to the land like the Palestinians. That means I have a cultural connection to the land. That means, yeah, sure, you could argue I might have some right to like travel there and see some of the sites and meet the people and have friendly conversations. But that doesn't give me the right to own the land. And the fact that I'm constantly being gaslit from people from Germany and Poland as someone from like this mostly the Balkans and stuff like that, being gaslit that they have more of a right to this land because they've converted to Judaism. So now they get to own that land. When people who spoke the same language that my ancestors did have been living on that land for thousands of years, and you're not going to fight for, like, they don't get to do that. They don't get to have that same monopoly and power. Those are even some of the people that nowhere near as oppressed as the Palestinians, don't get me wrong. But like even within Israel, the Greek Orthodox Church leased the land that the Knesset is built on, and then had their bank accounts frozen when they even dared to like celebrate Easter stuff with some Palestinian Christians. And so it's completely bogus. And I encourage people to look into the actual history themselves because history is awesome and the history of Western Asia is just so beautiful. And you'll especially get a greater understanding for Greek history because what our kids are taught like in high school and stuff like that is some important part about like philosophers and stuff like that, but it's framed in a way to only tie Greece to the West when Greece is a land both between East and West. That's why the Orthodox eagle faces two ways.
Yeah, and here's the thing. So people concentrate on Jewish exile from 2,000 years ago during Roman controlled Palestine, and so like people talk about that, and I think that they don't talk enough about how during the Middle Ages and the Dark Ages, well, West Asia and South Asia were the places where refugees would come and they would get shelter and they would be allowed. And so they didn't have many options. And I think that, you know, I'm glad you bring up Zoroastrianism, and I'm glad that you bring it up because it does actually predate Judaism. And the concept of Ahura Mazda is their word for God. And they also, the concept of like the devil actually comes from Zoroastrianism, not even from
Yeah.
Judaism. And so so it influenced both Christianity and Islam in many ways that Judaism didn't even influence them in. And so then you have the Baha'i faith and all of that. And I think that we have to also understand that Iran, while they stayed steadfast in certain like they're a Shia majority country, right? But like they have in their engagement has been people can say that the proxies have been self-serving for them. Um, I disagree complete in some part, but I also agree in other parts. I think Hezbollah and the Houthis in Yemen were very instrumental in creating some layers of deterrence for Iran. But I think that ultimately what that shows is that Iran was willing to both, they wanted to set up deterrence for themselves, but they got themselves aligned with the human rights and dignity of Palestinians, who are majority are Sunni. So I think that it has to be understood in that lens, and people need to understand that there is actual sectarian tensions, and people need to think about Shia and Sunni sectarian tensions in the realm of like Irish Protestant and Catholic tensions in some parts of the Middle East. And I think that people need to understand that and need to understand that Iran, for whatever faults people think of Iran internally, I can list many faults internally for America, right? But like, I think that they don't have as many faults internationally as people like to say with their proxies of Hezbollah that literally protects Lebanon and also occasionally fights on behalf of the Palestinians, right? And so like I, it's just absurd. I think like if people truly understood that um like in World War II terms that we're on the side of the Axis, not the Allies, and that Iran is the leader of the Allies. Like, if people need those types of terms to actually understand what's happening, well, that's actually what's happening here. And so, like, if they set up Hezbollah, the Houthis, first of all, Iran was correct. Like, if you're just talking about from like you said earlier, that they're interested in like preserving the state, which means that they're interested in having a functional economy. And that also means that the people actually they have universal health care in Iran, I must say. The other thing that people need to understand, Iran has their universal health care provides they like this it is slightly problematic in some ways, but they provide for gender reassignment and gender
Yep. Yep.
affirmation care for transgender
I
people.
I point people out and they get their jaw hits the floor when I'm like, I as a trans person would have more rights to exist as a trans person in Iran than I would in Saudi Arabia, yet we're helping Saudi Arabia, not Iran. Like people just their jaw hits the floor because they have no idea.
But it's like I make that point, but I also have to make the point that they do also force some gay men that are not trans. They do force them to
Hmm.
be trans women, and I say that because like okay, so Iran offers an out for people. They are homophobic in this realm, and I'm trying to I don't want to overly pink wash or whatever. This is just facts, right? And so like they do force like let's say you're a gay couple, they're not going to automatically kill you. They will give you the option where one of you can go under gender reassignment surgery. And I don't like that from that standpoint. So it is kind of worse to be gay in Iran than in America, but it is better. It's objectively better to be trans. And also there's less stigma for cis men to marry a trans woman in Iran too, in their society. When I found that out, it was like amazing because it's like, okay, people don't know this. They don't understand it.
Yeah.
And they pay, like the government pays for like super expensive like hormone therapy and all that. So we have to say these things because we have to let people know. You know
Hmm.
about the temp know about temporary marriage in Iran too?
Yep, yep. I believe we're just about to run out of time,
Yeah.
but yeah, that was a perfect way of just shattering a lot of the illusions and hopefully
Yeah.
and people, if you heard anything interesting during this whole show, please research it more your own and make sure you're sourcing